Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Unlocking Energy Potential for the Agricultural Industry webinar, where we'll be unpacking how to harness renewable energy, wheeling and trading for sustainable long-term success in the South African agricultural industry. This collaborative webinar between Enpower Trading and AgriX is hosted by Future Cities Africa. The agricultural industry, like many other sectors of the economy, is grappling with the impact of load shedding, ever-increasing diesel costs, and Eskom electricity tariffs, as well as growing pressure from end consumers to become more sustainable and environmentally conscious. By embracing new and innovative solutions like renewable energy wheeling and trading, the South African agricultural industry can access sustainable energy, reduce costs, as well as enhance long-term competitiveness and sustainability of the industry in ever-increasing competitive global market. Firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers and a few notable people. Firstly, I'd like to thank the participants. Thank you for attending. It's greatly appreciated. I would also like to thank Koos Nel, the CEO of AgriX. I'd like to also thank Daniel Claassen, who's the Managing Director of Future Cities Africa. And then lastly, my colleagues from Enpower Trading, Fiona Martin, Carla Worth, Philip van Niekerk, and Guido Phillips. A few housekeeping rules for this webinar. The session will be recorded. Participants will receive and have access to the presentation and a webinar summary as well. If you could kindly please put any questions you have in the forum, and after we've done the presentations, we will go into a Q&A session and we will address these various questions. If you want to address any questions specifically to one of the participants, or then welcome to please put their name before your question. Otherwise, if you're unsure who you'd like to address the question to, you can also pop it in the Q&A section, and we'll ultimately decide which one of the presenters is best placed to answer your questions. We've allowed ample time at the end to have a proper Q&A session and really get an understanding of what the challenges are that the agricultural industry is facing in terms of electricity, where you see potential opportunities, and also where you see bottlenecks. Ultimately, wheeling and trading would like to be part of the future energy mix, and we as Enpower Trading ultimately would like to be one of the forerunners and enablers of this market within South Africa in order to service not only the wider economy, but also more specifically the South African agricultural industry. I'm going to hand over to Koos Nel. He's the co-founder and CEO of the AgriX Group. A bit of background on Koos. Koos holds a law degree and is an advocate of the High Court. Koos is also a qualified chartered marketer and certified financial planner. Prior to co-founding AgriX Group, Koos enjoyed a distinguished and impactful career at one of the leading financial institutions in SA, and also served as the head of Agri and strategic marketing for the largest financial services distribution channel in South Africa. Koos is going to do a short welcoming and set the scene for today's webinar, after which there will be a presentation by Enpower Trading. Thank you, Koos. Over to you.
Thanks for the opportunity, and welcome to everyone from my side. I trust that you will find this webinar informative, valuable, and enabling you to make better decisions. Also, that is what it's about. In AgriX, we have a passion to make a difference and unlock value with the right advice, access to expertise, appropriate products, and technology that we can bring to any challenge or opportunity. And we know that the energy sector is full of challenges. If you just look in terms of what is happening around us on a high level, the effect of load shedding on the agri industry and agri businesses that has been debated on many platforms and documented. But luckily we have just now 100 days without any load shedding. We're sitting with a new department that they're setting up for Department of Energy and Electricity. Regulatory changes that impacted the sector, allowing more competition and private sector participation in the mix. We have increased tariffs approved by NASA, and then rising environmental concerns about fossil fuels contribution to greenhouse emissions, impacting local and also global climate efforts. And then we can also throw in carbon tax. So even if you look at a global situation, so there are some trends that I just want to highlight. So there's a global shift to renewable energy. Innovation, technology advancements makes the energy provision more cost effective. Decentralization of distribution and additional energy resources. And South Africa is no exception. So I think we are experiencing a change from a very vertically one-party dominated distribution capability in Eskom to a more unbundled and competitive environment. And then you also have the digital technology in terms of grid efficiency. And I think the last one is the development of platforms and markets for trading of electricity that's enabling more efficient distribution. So the concept of wheeling is not new, but it's not effectively utilized yet. But opportunity is here, and I think that is what today is about. It has definite implications and open opportunities for the agri sector. So I've mentioned in terms of renewable energy, the focus to that, so it's more reliable, the impact on costs, so that can make a difference. Technology is changing the environment to reduce consumption. And using clean energy aligns also with sustainable farming practices, which are increasingly demanded by consumers and international markets. And now we're sitting with the opportunity of wheeling and energy trading, and that is what we are addressing today. In your attendance is testimony to the fact that there's a need for information on this very relevant and new solution that's available. And the objective of this webinar is really to put it into context, enable you, farmer, producer, businessman, to make informed decisions. To do this, we've partnered with Enpower Trading. You've already met Simon. So they are a licensed private electricity trading company. They have a mission to make a difference and to provide innovative and customized solutions for the agri industry. We are comfortable to partner with them, and that they have the expertise to give relevant advice, appropriate solutions, and they are keen to share it with you. So I know some of the elements of it could be technical, and I challenge them to make it very practical today. So that's all from my side. So thanks. Enjoy the webinar. I trust you will get a lot of value out of it. So I am handing over to Simon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it. And definitely share your sentiment. We're hoping to make this webinar as interesting and informative as possible for the various attendees. And again, thank you very much for attending the webinar. We're going to do a short presentation by Enpower Trading, but I'd like to give just a bit of background first on the two presenters. One of them is going to be myself. So just a bit of background on myself first. So I'm Simon Leroux. I'm the trading manager for Enpower Trading. I have a background I have a master's degree in financial markets. Prior to joining Enpower Trading, I was an international bulk ores and alloys trader for about 8 years for an American trading house called Traxxas. And more specifically, why am I the host of this webinar? So I come from a third generation farming family. We have a large deciduous fruit farming business and pack house in Vleersdorp, so in the Western Cape. We focus on apples, pears, and citrus, and primarily service the export market. So sustainability and within the agricultural sector is very close to my heart, and something that is incredibly important to me. I'd like to continue on our family business into the 4th and 5th generation. So that's ultimately where I come from. The second speaker who's going to co-present with myself is my colleague Philip van die Kerk. Philip is the quantitative manager at Enpower Trading. He really is the financial brains and modeling expert, as well as policy expert within our company. Philip has a background in mechanical engineering. He has a degree in mechanical engineering from Stellenbosch University. And Philip was actually integral in setting up one of our first municipal wheeling pilot projects in the George municipality. He also continues to be a significant voice in the ever-changing South African electricity trading landscape through his engagements with policymakers, regulators, and industry bodies, as well as speaking at various industry events. So I'm going to just quickly pull up the presentation. And as mentioned, if you have any questions during the presentation, you're welcome to just put them in the Q&A section. And then afterwards, we're really going to spend as much time as you require to answer any questions you may have. And please, again, this webinar is intended to be as collaborative as possible. So we really do encourage you to put any questions in the Q&A section. And even after that, we will open the floor as well. So you don't necessarily have to write down all your questions. If during the Q&A section you have another question, you're welcome to just raise your hand, and ultimately we will ensure that you get to answer or get to ask your question, and that we direct it to the correct person to answer. So firstly, obviously, the name of this webinar is Unlocking Energy Potential for the Agricultural Industry. So the market challenges, the energy crisis in South Africa remains a threat to South Africa's food supply chain and agricultural production. Frequent power cuts and insufficient access to reliable electricity affects irrigation schedules, fruit and wine processing, abattoirs, cold chain logistics, and more, resulting in reported losses of between 30 and 50%. As the market liberalizes, regulatory changes now allow customers the opportunity to choose their electricity supply source. Farmers and agri-processors have the ability to improve their energy strategy and use the solutions to better manage their risks and reduce expenses. As we know, South Africa is amongst the top 15 largest emitters of carbon dioxide worldwide, primarily due to the country's heavy reliance on coal energy. In no other sector is this impact of climate change as pronounced as in the agricultural sector, increasing stress on water resources and decreasing crop productivity. According to the Department of Agriculture, the climate change impact on agriculture could reduce the real GDP by 3%. Another thing that's very, very, very close to everyone's heart, and something that we've all felt over the last 15, 18 years, is between 2007, for example, and 2022, the Eskom tariff has increased by in excess of 653%, alongside persistent bouts of load shedding, which poses a significant threat to South Africa's food supply chain and agricultural production. As a result, farmers and agri-processors are starting to generate their own electricity without the need for a generation license or capital outlay. As the agri-industry invests in independent solutions, they will become less reliant on the national utility, alleviating the pressure on Eskom. So, threats facing the agri-sector. As we know, the value of primary agricultural production in South Africa was estimated around 419 million rand in 2022, and the primary agricultural sector has grown by an average of 7.5% per year since 2008. This has resulted in an increase in agricultural share of GDP from 2.2% in 2009 to 2.4% in 2022. Despite its relatively small share of total GDP, primary agriculture is an important sector in the South African economy. Agriculture remains a significant provider of employment, especially in the rural areas, and a major earner of foreign exchange. As we know, in South Africa, the power crisis has resulted in an estimated deficit of between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts of generation capacity to overcome. This has led to crippling power cuts over the past 16 years, since early 2008. South Africa, as mentioned, is also one of the largest carbon dioxide emitters in the world, as mentioned previously, in the top 15. Seasonal energy consumption in agriculture results in an inconsistent load profile, burdening those with limited accessibility to reliable energy. This has also limited the effectiveness of on-site solar, resulting in either low penetration rates or expensive oversized systems. And I've heard a number of stories about individual farmers who've invested heavily in solar, on-site solar, only to realize that they're using the solar quite significantly in, say, for example, 3-4 months of the year, and the rest of the year there's a bit of a wastage on the solar that's being generated. They're not able to absorb it. Lastly, elevated input costs in the agricultural sector is putting an unprecedented pressure on the sector, impacting efficiency and productivity. Just again, a bit of background on Enpower Trading. As Chris mentioned, we are a NERSA licensed energy trading company. We received our license in February of 2022, and we've been actively working in the market, not only to educate the market on what wheeling and trading is, but working closely with various market participants in order to bring wheeling and trading, not only from international large blue chip players and customers, all the way down to your smaller customers. Ultimately, our focus over the long term is not only to be able to for example, supply energy to large agro processors and large farming companies, but also to smaller customers. So ultimately, Enpower provides, as an energy trader, provides very aggressive, low-cost energy pricing with fixed escalations on a yearly basis. This is ultimately, I'll give a bit more detail later, but this is in stark contrast to the ever-increasing costs of electricity from Eskom and municipalities. We also provide the renewable energy certificates associated with this power, so that agro processors and farmers are able, within their reporting, to various supermarkets and customers, to show how they're able to reduce their Scope 2 emissions. A little bit of background on what wheeling and trading is. These things often sound quite technical, so I thought I'd probably give you the technical summary of what it is, and then I'll give a very good analogy that I hope will help you understand more clearly what wheeling and trading is. So just firstly, what is wheeling? Wheeling is the delivery of electricity generated by a private operation in one location to a buyer or off-taker in another location via a third-party network, Eskom or the municipality. And trading is the delivery of electricity generated by multiple independent power producers in many locations to multiple buyers or off-takers in a different location via a third-party network. And the analogy I came up with for today, specifically to the agri industry, is that in order to conceptualize wheeling, I would like you all to think of the entire energy grid within South Africa, whether it be Eskom or municipalities, as a dam filled with water. That water is essentially your electrons. It's the power that is flowing within that dam and within the grid. Then I would like you, for the purposes of wheeling, to think of what is wheeling. Wheeling essentially is an accounting transaction or a reconciliation of water flowing into a dam. So for example, if you were drawing water from a borehole and allowing that water to flow into the dam, you would have an idea of how much water is flowing into that dam. And you would also monitor how much water is flowing out of that dam. That is the reconciliation, and essentially that is wheeling. You have your independent power producer on the one side, think of them as the borehole, and pushing water into the dam, and you have the customer at the end, or think about the irrigation, the orchard on the other side, that is essentially receiving the water or the electricity. That is wheeling. Now, to think of trading is, this concept is exactly the same, but with one small tweak. The tweak is that you have multiple sources flowing into that dam of water. So this is multiple generators or multiple boreholes in this analogy flowing into the dam, and then multiple points of output. So multiple points where the water is flowing out or the electricity is flowing out. Think about in the farming context, you potentially pump out of 2 or 3 boreholes into one dam, and then ultimately that dam feeds multiple orchards or multiple different points of delivery or supply of water within your farming operation. So that is a way to think of wheeling and trading more conceptually in a farming context. Now, just a few notes on what the agricultural value proposition is. So here are the trader benefits. Traders allow you to optimize energy usage and enhance operational efficiency. The ability to optimize energy mixes between embedded rooftop solar, wheeled energy, and Eskom supply allow you to not only increase energy resilience, but reduce costs over time. there's also an opportunity, although Enpower Trading does not provide batteries, there is an opportunity to do time of use arbitrage on site. And what this means is through the implementation of batteries at your various operations, we are able to provide you, for example, with wheeled solar PV that is considered standard time power, so daytime tariff, and you are able to charge your batteries and then ultimately discharge that power at night during your peak times if you're running a pack house, for example, with a night shift. This will allow you to further reduce the cost of electricity and increase your profitability and sustainability. Then we look at the entire network. So at this point in time, as energy wheeling and trading rolls out within South Africa, firstly, all Eskom connected clients at this point have access to wheeling and trading. There are a few caveats when it comes to what your connection is at Eskom, but overwhelmingly, the entire Eskom grid is covered. Secondly, there are a few municipalities that have already enabled wheeling and trading. They are predominantly George Municipality, Overstrand, City of Cape Town. There are movements within Ekurhuleni and COJ, but again, for the purposes of this audience, going to focus on Eskom, as majority of agricultural clients are typically on Eskom connected networks and also on tariffs such as Rural Flex. There's an opportunity for risk diversification. We're able to provide over the short, medium, and long term a blend of various sources of power, whether it be solar PV, wind, hydro, or biomass over the period of time. And we're talking anywhere between contracting between 5 up to 20 years. Customers are not locked in traditional 20-year PPA deals that independent power producers typically offer. We are working on reducing that burden on customers by offering shorter term contracts. Then ultimately, there's definitely more flexible contracting terms when it comes to wheeling and trading versus embedded solar PV and traditional IPP wheeling. When you do although we do agree that embedded solar PV is something that farmers should definitely pursue, wheeling and trading is most certainly a complementary addition to that strategy. Furthermore, wheeling and trading is on more flexible terms. If you look at, for example, a solar PV embedded generation system, you have to take a view that your business will be around with it for the next 10, 15 years in order to see the full benefit of that solar PV system. You also need to ensure that you have a suitable space in order to generate that electricity. And a number of sites do not have enough rooftop space, especially your rural farmers and farmers that don't have secondary agro processing on site, who typically just have orchards or fields. There isn't usually enough space for solar PV unless it is ground mounted. So we do see this as a complementary addition to on-site solar. And again, as mentioned, more flexible than the 20-year PPAs that traditional independent power producers or power purchase agreements that independent power producers offer. Technology, we work with a number of innovative software providers in order to manage our customers' portfolios. We also look at our customers' consumption profiles holistically in order to ensure that we provide them with the adequate and most optimized solar PV or blended profile that we supply. The reason for this is we want to optimize customers' savings and make sure they receive the maximum renewable energy penetration. As mentioned, we are IPP or generation agnostic. What this means is that we are not contracted to any specific independent power producer, and we are not also focused on any specific source of renewable energy. We're able to blend a variety of energy sources and provide this as a portfolio or basket of goods to our customers. We also do integrated solutions. What this means is a customer does not have to sign different power purchase agreements for different sources of power. You do not have to contract on a solar contract and then a wind contract. And if we add in over time other alternate sources, you don't have to end up having 4 or 5 contracts. You also don't have to sign multiple contracts to cover each. If you have more than one offtake site, if you've got more than one farm, you don't have to sign contract for each of those farms. We see your entire portfolio as a holistic offtake point, and we ultimately structure our agreements accordingly in order to ensure that you have the most efficient and seamless experience as possible. As mentioned, renewable energy certificates are becoming more and more important to large corporates, but this is starting to move down the value chain. So more and more smaller and smaller companies are being expected, especially if they're exporting, to show what their scope 2 emissions are and how they're looking to reduce them. This is similar to various other initiatives that happened 10, 15 years ago, where specifically in the agri space, where farmers had to show, for example, how environmentally conscious they were, things like green buffer zones, etc. Ultimately, the biggest driver of other than sustainability and reduction in emissions is the savings of costs. So the savings on costs are quite extensive on wheeling and trading. We're able to offer up to 30% savings on customers' existing Eskom tariffs. We also offer fixed 7% escalations year on year. And what this allows customers is to be able to actually forecast ahead what their energy costs and costs are going to be over the next 5, 10, 15 years versus Eskom's continuous increases on electricity. So there are substantial savings that are unlocked through wheeling and trading. Again, there's also, as mentioned, this allows you, what do you do with these savings? Although wheeling and trading does not shield you against load shedding, the reductions in costs that you save through wheeling and trading, the amount of money that you save is able to then be reinvested in on-site solutions such as diesel generators, on-site solar PV, batteries, as well as offsetting your diesel costs. So we think this is very important to note. As mentioned again, we aggregate various renewable energy sources and provide this blended basket to our customers. As mentioned by Koos, although CBAM, or the European Carbon Border Tax Adjustment Mechanism, has not been implemented for agricultural products as yet, there is a lot of talk within European Parliament that CBAM will be extended to agricultural exports or imports into Europe by 2030. This will be a big shock to the South African agricultural industry and to its exports. And ultimately, I think farmers need to start being proactive about the reduction in their scope 2 emissions, so in order to ensure that you're able to be competitive in the international market. Customers are also becoming more and more eco-conscious, and customers are starting to ask about low carbon products. And these customers are ultimately putting pressure on supermarkets to move aggressively as well. So ultimately, these changes in the industry are unavoidable, and something similar to other changes we've seen over time in the agricultural industry, where different environmentally conscious standards start to become the norm. I would like to just take you through what renewable energy penetration is. As you can see, the different sources of power are very complementary. You can see here what on-site solar typically provides. So this is, if you had to think of in a day, your peak day and off-peak consumption at your site. Depending on the site, depending on your demand profile, around 20% is typically covered by on-site solar. This is assuming with no batteries, just a straight on-site solar, up to 20%. With the wheeling of just solar, typically you can add on another 30% renewable energy penetration. Renewable energy penetration is just the total percentage of your total consumption that's being offset by wheeled energy, in this instance, renewable energy. So just through on-site and then over and above that complementary solar PV wheeling, you can get up to about a 50% renewable energy penetration. After adding in different sources such as wind and hydro, customers over time will be able to offset their Eskom cost by up to 100%. and completely no longer be reliant on ever-increasing energy costs from Eskom and their municipalities. This is just another illustrative graph that shows you the increase in savings. So as you can see here, the most recent increases from Eskom of 18.65% and 12.74%, whereas Enpower is offering a 7% increase. This is up to 30% decrease in your cost of electricity. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Philip van der Kerk, who's going to take you through a very practical case study. This case study was focused on a large agricultural producer within the Western Cape region who focuses on deciduous fruit and wine. They also have agro-processing on site. So I'm going to hand over to Philip to take us through this presentation, or the rest of the presentation.
So this is a load profile of the client that Simon mentioned, and this is one of Enpower's existing clients. As you can see, it's quite a seasonal load, with most of the consumption being in the summer months and very little in the winter months. So it fits solar PV wheeling really well. We can also offer wheeling even if it's more seasonal to this and the other way around. So if you use more energy in the winter months, then the summer months we can also wheel to you. You will just have a lower penetration rate. So this is a Eskom connected customer. As you can see here, just taking you through the graph, this load profile is depicted in a time of use profile. So the red bars are the peak consumption, the gray bar is the standard consumption, and the green bar is the off-peak consumption. This client has a total load of around 3 million kilowatt hours over the year, and they're on the Eskom Mini Flex tariff. Next slide, please. So we offered this client this profile, as you can see with the empty bars. We are offsetting about 55% of the Eskom energy with renewable wheeled energy. This is a high percentage because of this customer's seasonal load being more in the summer months than in the winter months. For this client, savings was the most important part to optimize for. So this client didn't care that much about getting 100% renewable penetration, but they wanted to offset savings, and that's why we supplied more in the standard time compared to the peak or off-peak, or compared to the off-peak time. Yeah, and as I said, this resulted in about 55% energy savings. So for this client, then we offered two products. So as Simon mentioned, we can offer a 5-year contract or a 10-year contract. The 5-year contract resulted in savings of around about 700,000 in the first year and 900,000 for the 10-year contract. So the shorter the contract term, the little bit higher the price because of the increased risk. The longer the term, the lower the price. The cumulative savings for this client was 4.3 million, or estimated to be 4.3 million over the lifetime of over the 5 years, and 13.7 million over the 10 years. This was modeled on a very conservative Eskom escalation of 8%, as we know that Eskom applied for the 18 and 12% the previous 2 years, and they now applied for, I think it was in excess of 20% for the following year. So this was a conservative estimation of the supply. And just to put it in context, so the amount of energy that we supplied, or supplying this client, is around about 0.8 megawatts worth of solar PV if you had to compare it in that way. So I'm quickly going to go through the customer criteria necessary to wheel to a customer. So firstly, you unfortunately have to be MV connected or higher. There is talks in the industry that Eskom is going to expand this to low voltage customers with the virtual wheeling program, but that's not available yet. We're expecting it early next year. The minimum consumption for a client is around about 250,000 kilowatt hours a month. It's just due to the administrative processes behind connecting a customer. If it's too small, you won't see any savings if it's too small to offset your admin charges. Then, as Simon also mentioned, we're focusing on Eskom connected customers. Although we are operating in a few Munichs, like City of Cape Town, we're involved in the pilot process, George, Wipperstrand, and expanding into Ekurhuleni and COJ soon. Then the steps to the contracting steps to buy wheeled energy from us. So firstly, if you reach out, we will send you an NDA just to get the data from you. Then once we receive the at least 12 months worth of data, we will send you a proposal as well as the high-level commercial terms. These steps, step 3 and 4, we usually talk go through it with the customer to see what their needs are, from cost savings, how long the contract term must be, and then we optimize the solution for the customer. Once we find a solution, we agree on the commercial terms and sign a term sheet to work toward a full style PPA. After the PPA is signed, a significant step thereafter for the customer is to amend your electricity supply agreement with Eskom. And that's just so if you're Eskom connected or municipal connected customer, you would have an ESA or electricity supply agreement that dictates the terms that they supply energy with to you. And by receiving wheeled energy, you just need to amend that in order to receive the wheeled energy from us. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Philip. That's greatly appreciated. Thank you, everyone. What we're going to do before we go into the Q&A section is we're going to ask Dan to please put up a poll. So there's going to be this is going to be the first poll. There'll be a second poll just at the end of the webinar. This poll Dan will put up. I'm going to give you a minute or so just to answer. So as you can see, there's a question that says, what do you believe are the top 3 challenges for energy resilience and sustainability in South African agricultural industry? You're more than welcome to select, obviously, the top 3. So happy for you to please select which 3 you think are the most significant. So as everyone can see, the 71% has said load shedding, 86% is increasing electricity tariffs, 40% is diesel costs, 66% is grid infrastructure, and then lastly, 14% the lowest. I imagine also to be expected, as this is more a medium to long-term challenge, is increasing focus on carbon emissions. So as we've noted here, very topical, energy increasing, or the cost of electricity is definitely for the industry and for the attendees here the biggest challenge. Secondly, load shedding, and then lastly, grid infrastructure. I know a lot of rural areas are really struggling with failing grid infrastructure. Things, if the power line goes down, it takes or a transformer goes, it takes quite a bit of time, weeks sometimes, for power to be restored, especially in your outlying areas. So thank you for doing the poll. It's greatly appreciated. We're going to go into the Q&A section. Okay, so Jonathan Fisser asks, from Integrated Wind Power, and he's also a renewable energy consultant. He asks, while your supply is aggregated, what is the ideal size of a generator that you'd like to buy from in rated megawatt capacity to supply your typical customer? So I will probably answer this, but I'll also hand over to Philip. So, as we've noted in over our experiences, I guess, since we've started Enpower trading, is whether you're signing a 5 megawatt offtake with an IPP or a 100 megawatt offtake with an IPP, it typically takes the same amount of time to conclude these transactions. So as Enpower trading, we typically only offtake in minimum of 20 megawatts at a time. We prefer to typically focus on offtake sizes in excess of 50 megawatts. And then ultimately we aggregate that power down or disaggregate that power down and sell on smaller sizes to customers. But it would typically be the minimum would be 20 megawatts up to 150 megawatts is currently the range that we're playing in. There's a question here from I can't see who it's from. It's an anonymous attendee. And it says, what hinders Agri players from buying clean energy via wheeling? Main roadblocks you note. Philip, would you like to take this one?
So the current roadblocks in the industry is first your connection. So Enpower, Eskom has offered wheeling, I think it was for the last 10 or 12 years already. So if you're an Eskom connected customer, you have access to it. I think the long-term commitment is a bit of a roadblock for the customers. So they're not used to buying energy on a 5-year or 10-year or 20-year agreement. And you're used to buying energy from Eskom. So it's a little bit of a mind shift for the customer, but structurally the roadblocks are usually your connection and size of connection, as it was always just for the very large consumers, while there's changes in the industry to move it to smaller and smaller customers. So, and the industry is pushing for that. So we see that happening now.
Thank you, Philip. And then I think I would just like to add on to that question around why, what hinders them from just going directly buying via wheeling directly from an IPP. So currently the market in South Africa comes from a very structured environment. You had IPPs traditionally playing in the renewable energy procurement space, which was the REAP rounds. And we found that the securities requested by IPPs are quite burdensome when it comes to the kind of liquid securities you're required to put up, the tenors of agreements that customers are expected to sign, and also the relative size of those customers. If an IPP project is 100 megawatts in size, typically they don't want to go and sign up customers that are 1 megawatt in size, for example. So that's typically been the challenges, and that's where we as an energy trader really try and focus on filling that gap. Is essentially we go and put up the securities required by traditional large-scale IPPs within the market. We sign the long-term agreement with that IPP. We satisfy their security and what they require, and we ultimately then offer more favorable offtake terms and more flexibility to our customers. We've really tried to focus on that quite extensively. I see here then there's another question from, I believe, the same anonymous attendee. What are our security provisions? Liquid security and termination. Is there a way to sign with less requirements? So ultimately, the type of securities required from a customer are very much dependent on who the customer is, the quality of the offtaker, as well as the size of the offtake. So typically, if we are looking to provide someone with, for example, more than 50 megawatts, the securities are a little bit more burdensome, but obviously smaller customers, we're trying to be as flexible as possible. And ultimately, through having many customers, we also create a portfolio effect where we're able to manage the risks more adequately. I see now that there's a question from Daphne Chile. Thank you, Daphne. To what extent has the agricultural industry taken advantage of digital technologies to ramp up or improve via efficiency in the performance of solar PVs and other tech? Example, wind. Has agrivoltaics been impactful? Chris, would you like to take this question?
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, thanks for the question. So it's difficult to say. So I'll rather get back on that question because in terms of what's the real advantage around it, in terms of what difference it can make. So let's rather go get the information and get back to you, Daphne.
No problem. Okay, so just to note, any questions that aren't answered during this live Q&A, we will be providing written answers after the webinar that will go along with the recording as well as the presentation. So just going to make a note to keep that one there. Then we've got a question from Vessels. Can this be offered to clients on municipality accounts? So Vessel, thank you again for your question. It's greatly appreciated. So currently, it can in certain municipalities. The constitution within South Africa provides for certain rights for municipalities. So municipalities have the right to articulation or reticulation of power and water services within their municipality. So it is on a municipal by municipal basis that municipalities have to decide whether they want to implement wheeling or not. Currently, Eskom has taken a provision or decision to enable wheeling within the Eskom network, and there are a number of municipalities that are being quite proactive. As we know, wheeling and trading is already happening in the city of Cape Town. The Western Cape is already adopted its own wheeling framework for the wider Western Cape, and they're going to be most likely rolling out that to the different municipalities within the Western Cape. But these things do take time. You do have as well movements within Ekurhuleni and the city of Johannesburg. Ultimately, it's going to take a bit of time, but I think Philip can also speak to this, especially around Eskom has been making a push for its virtual wheeling platform that looks to, over the medium term, reducing the reliance on municipal initiatives in order to enable wheeling within municipalities. Philip, would you like to please add?
So Eskom has launched the virtual wheeling platform, and they're piloting with Vodacom on that. It's been, I think they launched it at the beginning of the year. There's a lot of info around it. It's still in pilot phase right now, and it's not open to everyone. But they said that timelines is for about beginning next year, and this will allow you to procure energy if you're in a municipality directly. It's a complex system how they get around the municipalities, but you can then procure even if you're in a municipality and not rely on the municipality to implement wheeling frameworks. So we'll look forward to that development and see when it's going to come out.
Greatly appreciate it. I see there's 2 more questions here at this stage, but please, anyone, if you'd like to continue adding questions, please do so, and we'll address them accordingly. So the question is there a way to get protection in case I can't use the contracted energy, prolonged load shedding, grid failure, etc.? I believe I'll answer this question, and then I'll hand over to Philip. I'll just briefly mention it. So currently, the reconciliations for the usage of power are done on a monthly basis. What this means is that Eskom, when it does its allocations of wheeled power, looks at what your consumption was over the entire month, and we allocate we provide to you as an accounting transaction at the end of the month. So I'm going to hand over to Philip to give a bit more context on the impact of load shedding. But to be clear, when you are being load shed, you're not consuming power. But importantly, Philip will speak to it now, is we've done quite a bit of modeling around the stages of load shedding you need to get to, where ultimately it's going to get to a point where the allocated energy or the energy you buy from us is not able to be allocated to your bill. You have to be down for quite an extensive period of time in order for that to start impacting you. You will obviously always allocate the wheeled power first to your bill before the Eskom power, because it is ultimately significantly cheaper. But Philip, could you just please give a bit more context on the modeling you've done around stages of load shedding and how that impacts customers and how we're able to mitigate it through the allocations at the end of the month, as well as having multiple offtake sites that aren't necessarily on the same load shedding schedule to de-risk the customer?
Sure. So I think that's one of the main advantages of going with the trader and not direct. with IPP, we have a portfolio of customers, so they don't get load shed at the same time. And as Simon mentioned, it's not that significant of a risk at the moment because of the monthly reconciliation. If a customer gets is load shed or there's grid failure, significant grid failure in the area for multiple days, we as a trader would be able to reallocate that power to our portfolio of customers. And if we are able to sell that power within that month, the customer won't be liable to pay for it. So we provide that as an extra service to the client. So we do significantly de-risk traditional PPA by providing that additional service.
Here's another question. The attendee asks, is there a way to sign a multi-party PPA? All of our farms are in the same area and we want to buy in bulk for a lower tariff. So I think the simple answer is yes, these kind of structures can be done. In the same vein as where we have one customer who's got many offtake points consolidated under one power purchase agreement. I think the simplest way to do this would be in the agricultural context is similar to how cooperatives work. So where you have a number of farmers who belong to a certain cooperative and they buy in raw materials, fertilizers, etc., as under the cooperative, and ultimately then benefit from the savings and the increase in the bulk purchase. A similar thing can be done. So for farmers to be able to do this, I think the simplest thing would be to create some form of very basic holdco company structure, of which then the ultimate owners or shareholders in that company are the different farmers. That contracting company would then contract with Enpower Trading and would be the legal entity responsible for the settling of the electricity bills on a monthly basis with Enpower, and ultimately the various farmers would benefit. Importantly to note that as long as each of those farmers has amended the energy supply agreement, Eskom doesn't care about which meters that power is wheeled to. As long as the energy supply agreements for those meters have been amended, the contracting party does not have to be the same person or owner of the ultimate meter. So that would probably be the most efficient way to structure that type of transaction, is to create some form of holdco company, of which then the different farmers are shareholders, similar to how cooperatives are structured. Then there's a question here from Vessels. How will the strategy from Eskom to move from monthly 30-minute reconciliation to move to monthly 30-minute reconciliations affect your offer, i.e. almost no banking as you would have had on 30 days? This is already implemented in COCT Cape Town. Philip, would you like to answer this, please?
Yeah, so we're already wheeling in the City of Cape Town pilot project, and with the customers in City of Cape Town, it's a discussion with them on the risk they want to take with the sizing of the offtake. So we have more customers in City of Cape Town to offset that risk, so we can allocate to more accounts. You get a little bit lower penetration for each customer, so you won't achieve the 55% as presented. You'll get closer to 30, maybe 20, depending on the type of load. But again, I think it's with a trader, we have a lot more sink, or what we call sinks for power. So if you can't consume, we can trade into other buckets or clients. Then also important to note is City of Cape Town offers a buyback tariff. So the last resort is we would just sell it to the city. It's the slightly reduced tariff, but you don't lose the energy as in Eskom, where you get the monthly reconciliation, but if you don't consume it, you lose all of it. I think a similar thing will be implemented on Eskom if they move to 30-minute recon, where they would buy back the significant or the energy at a reduced rate if they implement 30 minutes.
I don't see any further questions here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, is one. Okay, so at what point will SA reach Australia daytime oversupply situation? Philip, before we hand over to Chris.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I can't answer that one. Yeah, I think it's difficult to predict that. Yeah, I think our grid's a little bit more constrained. But yeah, no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Philip. No, I think I would just add one point there. We don't know, but I was once asked a question around when will load shedding be solved in South Africa, and I think it speaks to this. I said it's a very it's not a simple answer, because what does solving load shedding mean? Does solving load shedding mean, the power doesn't go off, but we have 0% economic growth? Or 0.4, 0.6%, which is what we currently are? Or does load shedding mean is solved when we are growing at 6-7% and at the same time don't have any power constraints? So, South Africa, in order for itself to grow at 5-6%, significant additional power needs to come onto the grid. There are a number of factories that are under care and maintenance, smelters, etc. The demand from the mining sector has been quite poor because of this. So we do think that over time, the largest economies in the world who've grown significantly went and had excess generation, built lots of excess generation and capacity, and then ultimately the economy grew into the size. So the demand was firstly an excess supply, and then the demand caught up and eventually met supply. We believe Australia is in a position where the economy is quite developed, and ultimately not growing significantly anymore. And so you've now in a situation where they have certain times of the day where there is an excess supply of electricity and negative pricing curves on, for example, solar PV. So I think that would be our view. One of our founding shareholders, in closing remarks, founded the largest private power trading business in Turkey. 15 years ago, Turkey was a monopolistic industry similar to us with Eskom, and it took them about 15 years to liberalize to a point of having day-ahead markets and a fully liberalized power trading market. So we believe there's quite a lot of way for South Africa still to go, and a number of projects to come online. And ultimately, our grid is also severely constrained. That's probably the next phase of privatization, is distribution of electricity and more joint ventures between government, Eskom, and the private sector. Chris, I'd like to hand over to you to please just give some closing remarks.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Really appreciate. First of all, thanks a lot for all the attendees, all the questions. We really appreciate. And then to Simon and Philip, thanks for presenting the webinar and sharing the information. It is clear we're sitting with a changing landscape, and wheeling trading is going to play a more and more important role in considering the options available for a business, for a farmer, wherever you are. And that was the objective of this webinar, is to share the information, to help you to make the right decisions, to know where you can, which door you can knock for more answers. But I think the information has been shared was valuable. I want to thank Simon and Philip for the way in which they've done it. They're very professional. It's great to be associated with you, and looking forward to do more of these if there's a need. To the attendees, if there are more questions, please feel free to add it, and we will see how we can answer it. Thanks, Simon, Philip, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it. So just to reiterate, thank you once again for taking the time on this afternoon to attend our webinar. As mentioned, we will be sharing the recording. Daphne, we will be giving you a written feedback to your question. We will also be providing the presentation, and please if any of you are interested in what Enpower Trading is doing, as well as AgriX, our websites are easily findable on Google, and we do encourage you to visit the AgriX website as well as the Enpower Trading website. Dan from Future Cities Africa, thank you again for always hosting a very professional webinar. Without you, we wouldn't have had so many attendees, and as well as the smoothness of how we've implemented the technology for this webinar. Thank you again, everyone, and we hope you have a fantastic afternoon. And go Bokke.